Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thanks a lot for joining in today. And for the second session of the growth series, we have Jeff with us. And we're just going to take a moment before we start in. A lot of hellos in the chat. Let us know in the chat where are you joining from. Okay, I can see some fellow people from Barcelona, London, India, Ukraine, Denmark.
Wow.
For this session, I believe we are going to miss our friends from US because it is going to be midnight there. But otherwise, all the people. Okay, I can see one from California. Well, that's quite a commitment. Thanks for
It
joining in.
is.
Okay, so let's get started. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for joining in today. And before we get started, just let me give you a quick intro about Jeff. Although I don't really think that he needs an introduction, but still, for the sake of official purposes. So, Jeff helps organizations build better products and executives build the cultures that build better products. He's the co-author of award-winning book Lean UX, now in its third edition, and the Harvard Business Review Press book Sense and Response. Starting off as a software designer, Jeff now works as a coach, consultant, and a keynote speaker, helping companies bridge the gap between business agility, digital transformation, product management, and human-centered design. His most recent book, Forever Employable, was published in June 20. And welcome again, Jeff. Excited to get started here.
Thanks so much for having me, of course. This is great. Nice to see everybody. Hello.
Okay, we have over 500 people in this session now. So let's get started with the first question. And just a reminder to everyone, throughout the session, wherever you feel you want to add a question, feel free to add your question in the Q&A box, and we'll be taking your questions live in the last 10 minutes of the session today. Okay. For the first one, Jeff, you have worked as an in-house employee, consultant, manager, and entrepreneur in companies of all sizes. I'm sure, given that vast experience, you would have seen agility and customer experience done well, and you would have definitely seen them being done poorly as well. So, would you like to share some of those stories and the key takeaways from them?
Sure. I mean, there's, you know, sadly, the, the done badly column has a lot more examples. So let's start with the positive. Let's start with the ones that have done it well, or things that have done well. I mean, look, I think it's rare in a large organization for the entire organization to be doing, agile, or to be agile across the entire organization. But there are always pockets of success. I think one of the more successful efforts at scale that I've seen over the years has been, we did a lot of work with Capital One in the United States. They're a bank, a big bank, but a relatively new bank compared to sort of the JP Morgans and the Citibanks of the world. And they spent a significant amount of effort and time working to build an agile organization. What I mean by that is the lowercase a. At the time, I think they had 50,000 employees, and they really were coming to the conclusion that they were a software company that happened to be in the financial services business. And that was a big transformation for them, because obviously the leadership of the organization saw themselves as a bank, not as a software company. But the more and more that this software driven reality hit them, the more they began to invest in actually maximizing the success of building great digital products and services. They invested in training, they invested in space, like physical space before the pandemic. They invested heavily for a long time in agile support roles, which they recently and very publicly laid off. So they got rid of all their agile support roles. But in the years leading up to that, they had put in a tremendous amount of effort in building cross-functional teams, speaking with customers, increasing the frequency with which they were shipping updates to market, learning from those updates, iterating. And the one really interesting thing that I saw, I mean, I saw a lot of interesting things, but one of the really interesting things that I saw when I was there was several opportunities for teams to truly innovate and try to develop significantly better products and services, and in the process build fantastic experiments. I'll give you an example. There was one team that we saw there years ago that was determined to build a new revenue line that allowed, essentially their hypothesis was, if people could return their online purchases without giving it a second thought, right? If returning your online purchase was a no-brainer, people would spend more on their credit cards. That was the hypothesis. And they tested that hypothesis by hacking together a few bits of code in a website and deploying it to friends and family in a limited geographical area. And when the people who this fake service was deployed to needed to return something they bought online, it was the team, the product managers, the designers, the software engineers who went to their house, picked up the packages, and shipped them back to Amazon or whatever store they bought it from. And it was a really impressive experiment and learning, and kind of a 3-month innovation cycle that I saw there. The company was really excited. They had proven that this was could be a viable business model for the organization. And what was interesting was, after 3 months, they presented that to the company. The company was thrilled. They're like, wow, you figured this out in 3 months. You built almost nothing. You really put yourself in this kind of very lean mindset, this very customer focused, how do we best deliver value? And then we'll automate everything kind of mindset. And they were super excited because it looked like they were going to make more money on this. This was going to open up a new revenue stream. The one thing that team had forgotten to do was talk to legal. And it turns out that banks can't be in the inventory business, right? They can't handle inventory, at least in the US. And so that was, their idea was amazing. It was going to make money, and it was 100% illegal. So that was a big downer. But that was a really impressive, display from a bank, right? To build experiments, to test different credit card features in a regulated environment. I thought that was a really nice story and a nice approach from that particular organization. The other thing that organization did well was they had coaches at the executive level. I was one of them. Myself and Josh Seiden and Barry O'Reilly, the three of us worked as essentially agile coaches to the executive team for 6 months. And that was, again, not easy. These are seasoned folks who know how to run a bank and know how to do their jobs. What they were less good at was running a software company and doing it in an agile fashion. And it was amazing kind of when the lights went on for those folks about what it meant to manage an agile organization, the changes that you would see downstream in the company, the facilitation, the changing of incentives, the changing of team structures, the demands that were made on the teams. So that was a really good example from kind of the last, decade or so that I thought worked really well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jeff. And just to dive a little deep down into it, in terms of innovation and risk taking, so how do you encourage a balance between fostering innovation and managing the inherent risk, especially in industries that may be more resistant to change?
Look, there's something I think that needs to be called out. I think we need to explicitly identify in an organization which teams are innovation teams and which teams are not. Not everybody can be can be on an innovation team, right? Not every team is an innovation team. Some are maintenance teams. Some are incremental improvement teams, right? Some teams are truly going to be innovation teams, right? And I think that in a team that is designated an innovation team, there needs to be a far higher tolerance of risk and a far higher tolerance for failure in that team, right? So, an innovation team should be failing at least half the time, right? Maybe even more, because if they're not really pushing the envelope, right? They're not really trying that hard. Now, we don't want all of our teams failing half the time or 80% of the time, right? There are situations where we have an existing product, it works well in market, we just have to maintain it, continuously improve it, make sure we're keeping up with the times, right? And in those situations, sure, we're going to try some new hypotheses, try some new experiments, right? But we have the capability to mitigate that risk by running lightweight experiments, by deploying A/B tests, but ultimately the impact of those changes is not typically designed to have an innovative leap effect on the product. That's typically another team's mandate. And so I think it's really important to call those two things out. Now, regardless of what type of team that you're on, you're going to try to push the product forward, to some extent or another. And as you're thinking about what you'd like to move forward, the experiments that you run to test your ideas need to be safe to fail experiments. So that's how we mitigate risk. We build experiments that are safe to fail. If this experiment fails, we don't put the company in danger. We don't put the revenue stream in danger. We don't put the product in any kind of risk, or the customer in any kind of risk, right? So safe to fail experiments are things like customer interviews, paper prototypes, clickable prototypes, A/B tests to a fraction of the organization. Wizard of Oz tests where the service doesn't have any actual back end; it's all run by humans. There's a million ways to do this, but the idea is that if the experiment fails, we're still safe, and so we're going to build that into our learning so that the risks that we take are smaller.
Yeah, that really makes sense. And in your view, what do you say? What role does the leadership team or the board play in fostering a culture of innovation and customer centricity?
What role does the leadership team
Yeah.
play? Um, Look, the leadership team is crucial to the customer centricity of an organization. The leadership team determines what's valuable to the company. They determine what gets celebrated, what gets rewarded, what gets promoted, what they talk about at the all hands, who they point to as, wow, he or she did a great job, whatever it is. They're crucial to that. And the other thing they're crucial for is being honest and humble with the organization. So if the leadership team celebrates learning, celebrates course correction, stands up in front of the organization and said, I know we said we were going to the left, but we went to the left a little bit. We learned some new things. It turns out we should go to the right instead, right? If the leadership does those things, we're focused on agility, customer centricity, continuous learning, improvement, innovation, creativity, those types of things. If the leadership team celebrates the deployment of products, if it celebrates individual heroics, well, we wouldn't, if it wasn't for that, that rock star engineer, we would never have shipped this, right? If the leadership never admits that they're wrong, right? They're always, regardless of what's happened, right? Even after we've shipped everything and it didn't work, then generally speaking, you're going to be working in a culture of focus on outputs, usually a culture of fear, a culture focused on velocity and shipping features, and the kinds of learning, continuous improvement, experimentation, and focus on the customer that we'd love to see becomes mostly lip service, but not actually realized in the company. And so leadership is crucial. They set the culture.
Okay. Thanks for that. And let's go into the amalgamation of business and design now, right? So, how do you believe integrating design principles into business strategies contributes to the overall success of the program or of the team or the entire organization as such?
Look, you can't be a good designer and not understand business, right? I'm not even going to say the business. Let's just start with business first. without the article, right? You can't be a good designer and not understand how organizations are made up, how organizations make money, how organizations can make money, right? What are business models? What are viable business models for the industry that you're in? You know, as a designer, you're not making art, you're solving a business problem. And so understanding the context in which that business problem is sitting is crucial to your success, right? You can develop a fantastic solution to a very difficult workflow, right? But if it somehow drives the users of that product to spend less money with the organization or spend less time or find less value in the product, then it didn't work, right? No matter how brilliant your solution is. And so understanding business is really important, right? What is the makeup of an organization, how organizations function, how they make money, what the different parts of an organization are. I think that's really important. And then I think it's equally as important to understand the business that you're in, right? So wherever you work, what industry are you in? What vertical are you in? How does your company make money, right? Who pays you? Sometimes it's obvious, right? We're e-commerce, right? So we sell directly to consumer. It's the consumer. And sometimes it's less obvious about who pays us, right? Social media, social networking, etc. Right? Who's the actual customer in each situation? How do we serve their needs? And how does changing their behavior impact the business? All of these things are crucial. There was I was speaking to a founder yesterday, and he was looking at analytics for his product, and he had a very clear sense of this one feature of the product. He's like, this is the core part of the user experience. This is what we want everybody doing, right? And when we were looking at his analytics, he was driving a lot of traffic to that core experience, and a huge percentage of the people who were then going through that experience were churning out of the product. They were quitting the product, right? That's a business problem. That's a design problem, and it challenges your assumptions, right? His assumption as founder was this is crucial to our success, and yet every customer out of every customer, 10 customers that were going in there, 4 of them were leaving the business, right? Something was broken there. And so understanding the context in which you work is critical. Understanding how the organization, I have to tell you, like I work, and again, in startups, it's a little bit easier. In sort of B2C organizations, typically it's a little bit easier, not universally. But I work with a lot of large multinational B2B companies. And the folks that I work with, sometimes you ask them, how does the company make money? They don't know. Right? You need to know that, right? If you're going to be a good designer, you're not just solving customer problems. You're solving customer problems in the service of making your organization successful. And if you don't know what success is for your organization, you need to go find out, because you can't do good design work before that.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I can actually think of multiple cases. So even we at ADPList talk to a lot of organizations, and we help them grow up their mentorship pool inside or help their teams succeed in their businesses. And sometimes this is what we've also seen, that the teams don't really work together well, and there are big chunk of differences as well, right? And now when we go towards measuring the success side of things, so in the pursuit of outcomes over output, how do you recommend organizations measure the success of their initiatives, especially when it comes to human behavior changes?
Human behavior team. That's how I recommend it, right? Let's unpack that. But that's the answer, right? The answer was in the question, right? I
Mhm.
recommend organizations that everybody measures the success of the work that they do with human behavior changes. Now, we call those outcomes, right? Measures of human behavior that have an impact on the business. We can also call them key results if we're talking about objectives and key results. But ultimately, the measure of success of the work that we do is changes in human behavior. Let me explain why. Okay. Now, I'm going to make an assumption here, and I know there's a lot of folks on the call, and so assumptions are risky, but I'm going to make an assumption that the overwhelming majority of the folks listening to this conversation build digital products and services. Okay, I assume that's safe. A safe assumption. We'll see. We'll see how the chats go.
Yeah.
Right. That's my assumption. Okay. Today, digital products and services are continuous. Right. They are continuous systems that we just optimize and build on forever. Right. There is no end to what we're building. Right. So you literally can work on something forever. And I'll prove it to you. Right. Let me ask you a question. When is Google done? Right. When is Amazon done? Right. It sounds like a stupid question, right? They're never done. They're always going to make things better. They're always going to improve. And the same goes for you, right? Whatever you're working on, it's never finished per se. So how do we know when to stop working on something and start working on something else when we can continuously improve and make things better, right? In the olden times, right, when software came in a box, we were done when we had to go put the software in a box, right? Quite literally,
Yeah.
right? We had to go print CDs, sometimes millions of them at a time, put them in a box and ship them to stores. And so we were done at that point. Today, right, we don't sell software in a box. We sell software as a service, right? You don't go buy a box of Facebook or a box of Instagram or, or whatever, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so how do we know that we're done? Right? We know we're done when we've impacted customer behavior enough, right? So today we have a checkout process, right? And the conversion rate when somebody starts the checkout process to them paying, and being done, it's a 4-step process. It's about a 65% success rate. Okay, great. We want to get that from 65% to 95. 100% is always difficult. There's always reasons why people will drop out, right? But we want to get it from 65 to 95%. Okay, terrific, right? Now we have a goal. We're going to optimize and improve and innovate and be creative and design and build and prototype until we can figure out the best way to get folks to complete that checkout process more successfully, right? Now that could take a sprint. It could take a quarter. It could take a half year. It could take a year. It depends, right? As long as that's strategically important to us, we're going to work on that. And we know that we're done, that we've built enough stuff, that we've designed enough stuff, that we've built it and designed it the right way. When people are changing their behavior in a meaningful way for them and in a meaningful way for our business as well, right? And so the measure of success for the stuff that we make is meaningful changes in human behavior. It's outcomes or key results in objectives and key results, right? Because look, the deployment of features, even though it's still widely celebrated inside organizations, it is not a determination of value, right? Deploying a feature to market only guarantees you 2 things, right? More code to maintain and more technical debt. That's it. Those are the only 2 guarantees you have, right? It could be valuable. It might not be valuable, right? And that's why we do testing and experimentation before we ship stuff to everybody. But the measure of success is, what are people doing today? And how would we like to see them behaving in the future differently? And that's your measure of success.
Yeah, that's so true, Jeff. And let's take the last 2 questions before we head on to the audience Q&A. And this is on remote work and collaboration. So specifically after the pandemic, there has been an increasing trend towards remote work. How can organizations now maintain a strong collaborative culture, particularly in the context of lean and agile practices?
Look, it's interesting, right? Because the pendulum is kind of swinging back now, right? So this hybrid world that we're in is very interesting. Look, in a in a distributed world, the innovation and the collaboration is possible. It can thrive. We've got the tools for it. We've got the murals and the Miros of the world. We've got the Notions and the Google Docs for collaboration. We've got Zoom and AirMeet and Microsoft Teams, unfortunately, and all kinds of tools. that allow us to see each other, talk to each other, collaborate, share ideas, vote, to do all of those things. So the tools are there. Your organization has to invest in good tools. The interesting thing is this: we have to optimize the nature of these interactions for remote, right? So if you're a distributed team and there's 3 people in an office here and 2 people in an office there and 1 person at home here and 1 person at home there, we have to optimize for remote, right? All too often what I see happen is that you've got 3 folks on the same laptop in one office, right? And then you can't really figure out who you're talking to or who you're hearing because there's people from different places connecting, right? So it's optimizing for remote is absolutely key to making good distributed collaboration, right? So if one person's remote, everybody's going to pretend they're remote, right? That's how it's going to work. The other thing too, and this seems to get sort of discarded a bit, but if we want to collaborate with our distributed teams and be innovative and creative together, we have to be awake at the same time. And maybe that sounds obvious, right? And maybe that sounds stupid, but all too often, right? And look, you're based in India, right, Utkarsh?
Yeah.
Right. So many companies have teams based in India, right? And then the rest of the team is in the US and in Europe and wherever, right? Building any kind of a collaborative approach across continents requires us to be awake at the same time so we can talk to each other and see each other, right? Without that, the collaboration is more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult. And so as we're thinking about staffing and building our teams, let's at least make sure that those teams have overlapping daylight hours, right? At least a few during the day where we know that, India, New York, and Paris are online. So we're going to talk for a couple of hours every day during that time, whatever it is. But you have to be awake at the same time as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's so true, Jeff. And specifically, when we talk about ADP list, so a general misconception is that we're a large team, but in actuality, we're just 9 people spread in different countries. And so I definitely agree with what you said because we also kind of have troubles in terms of syncing up with our team members. Some of them are based in US, some of them are based in US, in Singapore, Australia. So becomes tough, but yeah, I would say that has its own pleasures and its own learnings as well. Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah. So let's take the last one on future trends. And this is about what emerging trends do you see shaping the intersection of business, design, technology, and how organizations should prepare for them.
Uh, so we have to talk about AI. I suppose we do a little bit. We'll talk about it a little bit. It's not my favorite topic, not because it's not cool, right, or awesome, or fascinating, or terrifying, or whatever. Right? It is all of those things, right? I'm frustrated with the topic because it's the shiny object that everybody's chasing right now, right? Miro was down earlier this week or last week for about a half a day or something like that, right? Like I would much rather have stability and reliability in the product than AI, right? So like that's the thing that worries me. It's like, oh my God, AI, let's go build it, but oh shit, the product is down, right? Like that's to me that's absolutely crucial, right? Let's get the basics and the fundamentals right. Let's make sure the value is there, and then let's see how AI can add that. So I think it's a huge trend, and it's super interesting, and right. And so there are clearly legitimate uses and places where it makes everything easier, better, faster, et cetera. It makes us more efficient. And there are situations where it really feels like somebody just sort of put like a fancy thing on top of their product that doesn't really make sense. I'll give you an example. I use I won't name it because I actually love it. I don't want to talk poorly about them publicly, but I use an email client that I love and I pay for it. It's and I love every feature. And they recently added AI, right? And it's like, come on, like stability, usability, those things I really care about. Search, how about email search? That would be fantastic. Like I don't need the client to answer my emails for me. Like it's never going to answer them like I answer them. 1 word, 2 word, 3 words. It's never going to have the context or the empathy that I have for it, right? I'd much rather see the core email functionality work better there. right? So to me, that's the craze right now. And like with all crazes, just make sure it's solving a real need before we advocate for it and push for it. Or if it's being pushed onto you, which is the case probably I'm guessing for a lot of you, is to push back and say, great, what problem are we solving with AI? And then how will we know that it worked, right? What is the behavior change that we want to see in our target audience and our users that tells us that this was a good use of time, that we built something that actually was meaningful to these folks?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Let's head over to the Q&A, and we have the first one from Peter. Let me pull up the question on stage. And this is, shouldn't all teams be at least part-time innovation teams?
Shouldn't all teams be these part-time innovation teams? Hi, Peter. um, look, I, I think every team should understand their mandate. I think every team should strive to be innovative. I'll give you that. But I don't know that every team is an innovation team. I think that's a little risky, right? I feel like there are roles, there are teams in an organization whose job really is to push, to push the boundaries of the industry, right? We're to and to push the boundaries of how we deliver services in this particular vertical. And I think there are other teams whose job it is to maintain, a consistent, continuous improvement track and process, and to be innovative in doing so, right? But I don't think we're tasking those teams with innovation per se. I think there's a subtle difference there, right? If I'm an innovation team, I feel like my mandate is to reinvent the way people drive cars, right? If I'm on a team that is in charge of the infotainment system in vehicles, right? I want to be a bit innovative about how people interact with it, or how it you know sounds in the car, or whatever it is, right? And I think to me that's the subtle difference there, is kind of the degree to which you're pushing the change, or the step forward. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, let's go to the next one. This is in terms of success metrics. This one is from Rifan. The question being, from your experience, what are your success metrics for the innovation team?
So that's interesting, right? So again, using my distinction there, I'm going to talk about true innovation teams. And look, the models that I think about, there's a fantastic video on YouTube. I don't know, I used it to teach for years, and then I've stopped just because honestly I got bored with it. But it was the Nordstrom sunglass store video. Nordstrom is a big American department store, and they had an innovation team, and they went to kind of innovate the way people shop for sunglasses, right? And if you haven't seen that video, it's 7 minutes long. You should Google it and watch it. It's fantastic. Just Google or YouTube Nordstrom sunglass video, and you'll find it. I guarantee it. Um, uh, that team that sadly doesn't exist anymore, their measure of success was to fail 80% of the time, right? So whatever idea they came up with, they needed to fail 80% of it. If they weren't failing 80% of the time, they weren't trying hard enough, right? So I think for an innovation team, there is actually a target failure rate. And then once you sort of find traction, I think it's adoption rates, right? Early adoption rates, things that we're looking for, right? So that's to me, those would be the kind of metrics I'm looking for with innovation teams.
Thank you. Let's go to the next one. This is okay. This one is on blockchain. This one is from Adrian. Being related to bank, what are your thoughts on blockchain technology?
So I'll answer this quickly, simply because I'm not an expert, right? So I know the basics, right? And so I think blockchain continues to hold tremendous potential. I'm not a huge fan of crypto. I understand it. I'm not that guy who's like crypto, right? Like, that's not me. I get it. I think I own a little bit of Bitcoin, but aside from crypto, I think blockchain is a really interesting technology that has yet to really find its niche, right? Like I'm talking about like significant, right? I've heard like, there's this contracts and there's this and that, right? But mass adoption, we're not there yet, right? And so it hasn't found its niche yet. And I'm curious to see where that evolves to, but I'm not an expert. And so that's all I have to say on the topic.
Okay. Let's take the last couple of these. This one is from Mahmood. And this is in a large organization that strives for sales and numbers and puts so much effort into marketing in all channels. What are the key steps approach to first put a lean, agile process for product teams and convince all to stick to it for even better outcomes?
The most important thing that you can do is to start from a problem statement, which is so rare still. Gosh, I've been screaming about this for 20 years at this point. Um, Start from a problem statement. Most organizations start from a solution, right? Build the mobile app, make it red, make it blue, have it do this thing. Start from the problem statement. What is the problem that we're trying to solve for folks today? Today, folks are doing X, right? And because of that, they're struggling to do Y. Okay. And if we could solve for that, we want to see folks doing more of Y, 50% more, 75% more, whatever it is, right? Now we've started with a problem statement. Okay, terrific. What that does is it opens up the space for product discovery and experimentation, right? Now the team has to go figure out what solution to build and how to design and implement it in order to solve that problem and change the outcome, to change human behavior in that direction, right? That's the goal. And once you've done that, right? So if you start from a problem statement and you define success as behavior change rather than deploying a feature, then as the team is working towards an idea, if what they're working towards doesn't change human behavior, doesn't change the behavior of the customer behavior, then they've got the evidence to adjust course. And changing course based on evidence is being agile. It is agility, right? And so to me, the best thing that you can do to start to drive increased agility in your organization and more customer centricity is to start with the problem that you're solving and define success for that problem in terms of outcomes or in terms of human behavior. Things will flow from there, right? Because again, you start to collect the evidence that allows you to say, hey, that was an interesting idea, boss, colleague, other person in the company, right? We tried it. It doesn't shift behavior in the right way. And so we're going to move to something else, right? We start to have more objective evidence-based conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Let's take the last one for the session. This one is from Aditya, and the question is: how do you suggest designers convey the business ROI of design before they are brought into the conversation?
How do I suggest designers convey the business ROI of design before they're brought into the conversation? This is the never-ending question. This is the question that we've been dealing with as designers for the entirety of my career, and certainly well before that. Look, there's a variety of ways to do this, right? I think that you can quantify. So you could measure a baseline of where things are currently, or kind of before, and then measure after design, and say, look, before design, right, our conversion rate was 12%. After design, it's 27%. That translates into an extra $200,000 a month or whatever, right? And that was because of design. You can do that and move forward. I think ultimately, though, if organizations that just simply don't get the value of design, you're going to find yourself having this battle and having this conversation forever, as evidenced by the fact that we're still talking about this, despite the Apples of the world, right, and the Nests of the world, and the Netflixes, and all these really well designed products and services, right? Everybody says they want to be that way, but then they actually don't invest in it. So I think measuring your work, quantifying the impact both in usage as well as in money that your work makes to the organization goes a long way. But if you find yourself fighting this battle again and again and again and again, I would argue that you are in an organization that doesn't value what you do. And if you have the opportunity or the ability to change, I would consider changing roles.
Thanks a lot, Jeff, and thanks a lot for joining today. Thanks a lot for making time. Thank you, everyone. Any last words from your side, Jeff, before we call it a day? And where can people reach out to you if they have more questions or if they want to follow you?
Yeah. So I put my email address in the chat, so you can absolutely email me with your unanswered questions. You can go to my website, jeffgothelf.com, read my blog, sign my newsletter, connect with me on LinkedIn. And the thing that I really care about the most right now is Josh Seiden and I are writing a book on OKRs. If you go to okr-book.com, and it's just a sign up form right now. We will have more there in the new year. The book is due out in March. We'd love to let you know about it. We hope that you buy it and share it with your organization. That's what matters to me. So thanks so much for having me. This was great. Nice to see everybody. And like I said, I hope to see you all again soon. Of course, thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks again, Jeff. And thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us today. We have the next session with Andy Bart that is happening next week. I've shared the link in the chat in case if you have not yet seen the session. And thanks a lot for joining again and see you around. Have a great
All
day.
right. Bye, folks. Take care.